Senator Wells.
Thank you, Speaker, and thanks, colleagues. I'm speaking, of course, on Senator Dalphond's amendment. After the debate earlier in the week, or maybe it was last week, there were some assertions made about drying no longer happening, or the drying season is over, and there were some discussions about the dollar figures that were expended on carbon tax. So I'd like to talk about that, and I didn't have to do much research on it because my inbox was flooded with notes from farmers, and I'm going to read just a couple of them. They're not edited at all. But before I do that, I want to thank Senator Quinn for his remarks. I'm in accord with everything he said on the financial side, which I'll talk about in a moment, but also the bill itself. I've tried to have in all my discourse on these, not just at committee, but on second reading, and the number of amendments that we've had. I've tried to keep it non-political. I've tried to not have it about the carbon tax. Senator Dasko asked me a question the other day when I spoke about that, and she said, "Isn't this just really about the carbon tax?" And I said, "No," and I've taken great pains to make this not about the carbon tax, that this really, for me, is about the farmers, the ranchers, and the growers. And I say those three words a lot because that's what it is to me. I don't say axe the tax. I don't talk about carbon tax in general. I recognize that it's a valid government policy and that they are the government in power, and that that's their policy, and that's what we accept. So I've taken great pains to take the merit side of the argument, because if my arguments don't stand on merit, they don't stand at all. So I want to talk about some of the notes that I got from actual farmers, from actual people who buy actual fuel, and spend actual money on carbon tax. And I asked them if I could use their names, and they said by all means. So John McDonnell of McDonnell OC Farms in Perth County, carbon tax paid in 2023, $2,281 on wheat drying and $26,400 on corn drying, total of $28,000, $28,700 this year. Larry Can of Meaford, Ontario, dried 500 tons of corn, $850 in carbon tax. Tota Farms in Burford, Ontario, ginseng farmers. I don't know what the margins are like in ginseng, but I'm told they're incredibly thin margins. Carbon tax on on the cost of drying ginseng root in 2022 was $19,600. Of that, $3,300 was carbon tax, 17%. So that certainly would eat up the margin. Doug and Dave Johnson of Mapleview Farms in Perth County. Their corn was a little wetter, probably around 30%. This is from a message they sent. It took more than they planned or budgeted to dry. They paid a total of $7,746 of carbon tax and dried just over 2,000 tons of corn. Doug told me that the money would have helped pay the tuition of his son attending the University of Guelph. And of course, University of Guelph, colleagues, as you know, is one of the top universities, perhaps in the world, in agriculture studies. Malady Acres in Perth County, they farm in Huron and Perth counties, 2,900 tons through their dryer this fall, $4,900 in carbon tax. So these are actual dollars. This is money, and it's not small money. Tara Terpstra, hog farmer from Huron County. Her on-farm propane costs for barn heating have increased by 21%. With just the carbon tax. She will spend $10,000 a year in additional production expenses. I've got a few more, and I'll read them because they cared enough to send in their information. Redwood Poultry of Mitchell, Ontario, young and new entrant to chicken farm, and they have a quota, so they can't scale up and benefit from the perhaps cost decreases from scaling up. Each time they fill with propane, it's another $256 in carbon tax. This is on top of the $11,000 a year in total barn heating costs. That's 16% in carbon tax. This one I think was directed, it was sent to me, but clearly directed at the comments from Senator Monsian. Still burning and turning here. This was a message from Drew Spolstra. About 75% of his drying was complete. They're about an hour west of Montreal. Another ginseng grower from Scotland, Ontario, spent $21,000 to dry ginseng root. Of that $21,000, $4,900 in carbon tax. Colleagues, that's 23%. And there are more. This one I will read. Allegro Acres near Ruthven, Ontario, 30 acres of greenhouse vegetable production paying nearly $100,000 a year in carbon tax. This is not small money, colleagues. Gem Farms in Kingsville, Ontario, paid $449,000 for its natural gas to heat 50 acres. Their carbon tax bill, 24%, almost $107,000.
Wow.
Steve Brackenridge, Peterborough, still drying here. We have over 1,600 tons of wet corn ahead of us and at least that much to come, dropping off another 10,000 litres of propane tomorrow. That should get me to Saturday morning. He told me he will spend, in 1 week alone, colleagues, $4,300 in carbon tax. $4,300. I don't know if farming is a lucrative business, but this makes it less lucrative and probably not lucrative at all. Colleagues, I'd like to address some of the quotes that were given at, in earlier speeches. Senator Dalphond, Senator Wu as well. Senator Wu suggested that heat pumps are the solution for heating barns, and of course, we heard from William David Lubitz, Associate Professor, School of Engineering at University of Guelph. He's a renowned expert. He appeared at AGFO. He appeared at the Agriculture and Forestry Committee, and here's what he said. So to use his words as an anchor for an argument against the carbon tax, I'll give colleagues the full quote of what he said, and I'll start this quote. We mentioned the heat pump technology. We are looking at that. Others are working on biomass, and of course, Senator Wu mentioned heat pump as the holy grail of grain drying. We mentioned the heat pump technology. We are looking at that. Others are working on biomass and other things as well. One could argue some of these are close to being ready for small-scale prototype experimental use, but I think the big question is when will they be ready for large-scale deployment? I believe some of these will be ready within the 8-year window, but not in the next year or two. Our project will not reach that in the next year or two, but it has the potential in the next 6 or 8 years. And of course, colleagues, you know that that the cap on included in this bill is 8 years. He goes on to say, similarly, I'm not aware of other technologies that are ready for that large-scale deployment in the next year or two. It takes a long time to go through those steps to roll out and scale up. This is a large infrastructure that takes a long time to build, test, and build again. That's not opinion, colleagues. That's from a renowned expert. Senator Dalphond, of course, in his speech, he had a number of selective quotes that, taken alone, would be certainly taken out of context. Let me give you just one. He quoted Chandra B. Singh, Senior Research Chair, Agricultural Engineering and Technology at Lethbridge College, suggesting that alternate technology is currently available. So again, Senator Dalphond, the critic, anchored his argument to the comments of Dr. Singh at committee. What Dr. Singh actually said, his full passage: propane and natural gas are the only two practical fuel sources for grain drying in Western Canada. Yep. Federal carbon pricing, with its proposed annual increase of $170 per tonne by 2030, will impact the farmers and ultimately the consumers who are already struggling with high food prices. I strongly support Bill C-234 to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. And that, colleagues, was a quote from Chandra B. Singh, and of course part of it was used by Senator Dalphond in his speech, but certainly not all of it. Excuse me. There was also a quote from MP Lobb, where Senator Dalphond, I think Mr. Lobb was in the gallery when Senator Dalphond partially quoted him, and so we quoted MP Lobb, and MP Lobb and I appeared at Agriculture Committee when this was first being studied, and we presented it as the movers in both the other place and here in the Senate. MP Lobb said, or Senator Dalphond quoted MP Lobb as saying, if you look at heating of barns, it's moving lockstep with the innovations that are heating a home, a commercial building, or an industrial building. Of course, the full quote from MP Lobb was, "We have to recognize that agriculture is one of the most innovative industries there is. It's absolutely one of the most innovative." And of course, colleagues, we know being innovative means to increase your efficiency and decrease your costs. He goes on to say, "If you have some of the grain drying businesses and innovators appear before committee, your jaw might hit the table because you'd be amazed at what they're actually doing. One of the thoughts that should not come out of this meeting is that agriculture is not innovating, or grain drying technology is not innovating. If you look at the heating of barns, it's moving lockstep with the innovations that are similar to heating a home, commercial building, or industrial building." And of course, what MP Lobb said was that the solutions are in, and I spoke with him about this, the solutions are in development, they're not in use or ready for on-farm application, and these innovations might still use propane or natural gas, but perhaps just less or more efficiently. Finally, colleagues, or near finally, I asked Senator Dalphond, because he keeps mentioning, and Senator Wu as well, not keeps mentioning, but he mentions a number of times, that he spoke passionately about the price signal. That it's important for the market to see that price signal. The price signal is really important, and he was quite passionate about it. Senator Wu as well. But they both seemed to lose that passion when I asked on the question on his debate, what's the price signal? What signal are you sending to the market on the question of price signal if diesel and gasoline are specifically exempted from the carbon price? They seem to lose their enthusiasm for that argument. Senator Dalphond's answer, of course, had nothing to do with the price signal. He mentioned that, I have his quote here. He talked about every economist in the entire world knows that to stop emitting greenhouse gases, the best way is a carbon tax. He talked about his trip to Taiwan, which I didn't think had anything to do with the price signal that he referenced. So, colleagues, I could obviously talk more about the bill, and I may if people have questions, and I'm happy to answer them. But as I hope we're nearing the end of the debate, certainly on this amendment, and I do expect other amendments. That seems clear, and that's a signal we've already received. That on the face of it, this is a good bill. When you dig into the simplicity of the bill, which is to remove the carbon tax, or to give an exemption on the carbon tax for on-farm heating and cooling of barns and for on-farm drying of grain, that it only seems fair and reasonable that farmers, ranchers and growers and dryers of grain should be exempted from, especially colleagues, from the transition fuels of natural gas and propane. Thank you.
Senator, you have a question?
Senator Wells, will you take a question?
I will, Senator Wu.
Well, thank you, first of all, for referring to my speech, and it's the opportunity for me to invite all colleagues to reread it and to see if his characterization is accurate. In the various submissions from hardworking farmers who wrote to you about the costs they incurred, did they also tell you how much they got in rebates from the government because of the fuel charges that were paid, particularly the largest farmers, some of which I think were reported in your debate, because they actually get more than the average. They may get more than what they have paid. Do you have those data from the same farmers that gave you the figures on carbon pricing?
Senator Wells.
So thank you for your question, Senator Wu. So I didn't hear from those farmers on the rebate, but I do know that the rebate is unfairly applied. I think we've already fully discussed that. On one farmer that I did speak with, in fact, I visited his farm, and he told me, and I mentioned this in an earlier intervention, it might have been in a speech or it might have been in a response, that the rebate, while it's not uniform, I don't want to say unfairly, it's obviously follows some some rule that includes a calculation. But the rebate is given to even those farmers, ranchers, and growers that have very little use for natural gas and propane, and it's applied on all farming costs, nothing to do specifically with fuel. And you may know that. If you don't know that, please know it now. The farmer that I visited in Okotoks, he has and I mentioned him before. He's got a modest size chicken operation, and last quarter, he received in rebates $47,000. That's a lot of money. It's great to get that check, $47,000. But he paid out in carbon tax, colleagues, over $153,000.
Wow. Sorry, Senator, your time has expired. Our